I'd love to introduce you to today's keynote speaker now. Urs Koenig is a rare blend of leadership expert, ultra-endurance athlete, academic, and UN peacekeeper. On the athletic front, he was a championship skier in Switzerland, and as an ultra-endurance athlete, he has won and set several ultra race records around the globe. Along the way, he has served as a widely published professor at multiple universities in Switzerland, the United States, and Australia. As an executive coach and leadership speaker, he has helped hundreds of leaders, dozens of executive teams across 4 continents develop and achieve new levels of leadership on their teams. In 2017, Urs served as the military peacekeeping commander for NATO's missions in the Balkans, and in 2021, he was a UN military peacekeeper in the Middle East. His wide-ranging leadership experiences have led him to become one of the world's foremost experts on humble leadership. His mission today is to help leaders embrace radical humility in their leadership to drive engagement, commitment, and high performance on their teams. Today, Urs is still a passionate ski mountaineering racer and a loving father to 2 teenage boys that make commanding soldiers look easy. So with that, please join me in welcoming Urs Koenig.
Because our world is changing so dramatically, the leadership tools and methods that got us here won't get us to where we need to go. And today, I'm going to demonstrate to you exactly how we can lead to win into the future of HR at our credit union and our banks. I call it leading with radical humility. And I'll do it all in my South Texas accent, which of course I don't have. I'm Swiss, and I have a Swiss-German accent, and that accent might require a little bit of extra effort on your part. But I hope it'll make our time together even more enjoyable. Leading with radical humility is a new modern kind of leadership that puts self-awareness, engagement, belonging, and a growth mindset at the forefront of everything we do, all while delivering stellar business results. A new kind of leadership that's tough on results and tender on people. I'm so excited about the power of leading with radical humility because of the last 35 years, I had the privilege to lead teams in the uber-competitive world of ultra-endurance competition to numerous wins and records. Multi-day adventure races, bike races ranging in length from 500 to 3,000 miles. Led teams in business, academia, and as was mentioned, in complex peacekeeping operations in the Balkans, in the Middle East, and in Africa. But you know what was actually my biggest leadership challenge? I also served as the president of my boys' school parent-teacher association. That's right. Reining in all those parents who are convinced the universe really was created to evolve around their little darling kids. The presidency of the PTA, and we have none of the parents in the room, by the way. The presidency of the PTA, that's a leadership challenge, if there ever was one, requiring plenty of radical humility. But in all seriousness, I'm telling you a little bit about my background to let you know that I've seen firsthand what happens when we let go of top-down command control, fear-based leadership, and embrace leading with radical humility. The 3 pillars we're going to talk about today are pillar number 1, lead like a compass, having the humility to know that I can't and mustn't do it all myself, and I need a strong, empowered team to help me get there. Pillar number 2, tough on results, tender on people, the ultimate yin-yang of humble leadership, high standards, high touch, and lastly, something that's, I'm sure, very close to all of us in HR, psychological safety, championing a fearless culture, making it safe for everybody to speak up with questions, concerns, crazy ideas, without fear of being shamed or worse, risking my job. In my research of the last 10 years, despite of what's going on politically right now, I've consistently found that leaders who embrace leading with radical humility operate at the highest level. Business, government, the military, finance, including professional sports. So let's do one quick preview. What do you think the best sports teams across all of time and all of sports have in common? Anybody, just yell it out. What do the best sports teams have in common? Great leaders, coach. They work together as a team. Competitive spirit. They win. Sometimes people say money, coaching staff, talent. As it turns out, some of these things. But according to very thorough research, the dominance of the 17 best sports teams across all of time and all of sports corresponds with the arrival and departure of one particular player. And that player was or would eventually become the captain. And because I'm often asked who these teams are, here are some of these 17 best sports teams. You see, across a variety of sports and a time frame. And it's not Kobe's Lakers, LeBron's Cavaliers, and Wayne Gretzky's Canada, by the way. So the dominance of these teams corresponds with the arrival and departure of the captain. What's more, these captains lack superstar talent. They avoid the spotlight. They combine focused, aggressive play with a willingness to do the unthankful tasks in the shadow, and they all have a low-key, democratic communication style. In other words, the best sports teams across all of time and all of sports are led by radically humble captain Carla Overbeck, the former US women's soccer captain. Any soccer fans in the room? Raise of hands. You know the real football? I've lived in this country for 24 years. How can you call a game that's mainly played with your hands football? Anyway, the real football. She only scored 7 goals in her entire international career, which even for a defender is low. She would humbly always look for ways to pass the ball, even if she could score herself. On and off the field, Overbeck displayed great humility, often schlepping her teammates back to their hotel room after an especially grueling international flight. I'm the captain, she says, but I'm no better than anybody else. I am certainly not a better soccer player. Out of the public eye, in training or practice, Overbeck pushed herself and her teammates relentlessly. Her incredible work ethic, her back-schlepping humility off the field, her passing humility on the field allowed her to amass huge credit that she could spend to hold her team members accountable. Her being tender on people allowed her to be tough on results. Overbeck hates the spotlight of speaking in public. She would not enjoy this gig right now. But out of the public eye, in training or practice or when they were traveling, she would constantly rally her teammates around their common goal of being the best soccer team on the planet. She led like a compass by consistently communicating their one common goal. At the same time, she made it safe for everybody on the team to speak up, including the younger players. She gave everybody a voice. She praised the messenger versus punished the messenger. In the process, championed a fearless, a psychologically safe culture at the US women's soccer team. Under Overbeck's radically humble leadership, tough on results, tender on people, lead like a compass, champion a fearless culture, the US women's soccer team dominated the competition almost at will, with numerous World Cup victories and Olympic medals. I'm telling you this little story for one reason. Embracing humble leadership is within the reach of all of us in this room and within the reach of all of our team members. If it is possible to employ radical humility in the grueling world that is professional sports, then doing exactly that is within the reach of all of us and within the reach of all of our team members. So let's dive in. Pillar number 1, lead like a compass. When we lead like a compass, we do 3 things. You'll see a pattern, by the way, throughout the pillars. We can all remember 3 things, right? We define a common goal, we empower our teammates, and then we get the hell out of the way. When we lead like a compass, We provide true north through clarity of our common goal or shared purpose versus giving our team members a detailed map on how they need to go from where they are to where they need to go. Compass leadership through common goal versus map leadership. Let me make the concept come alive with a government story. And you go like, yeah, right, Urs. When have I ever heard a good government story? This might be actually one. It's a glorious spring morning in Boston. The then Massachusetts Governor Devil Patrick had a thing of rare beauty as a public official. A day without official appointments. It was late morning, just finished a workout, was driving home. That's when his phone rings. It's the head of emergency management from the finish line of the Boston Marathon. Sir, we have a horrific disaster, terrible scenes. We need you to come down. We need to set up a command center. Most of us can remember how we felt when we first heard about the Boston Marathon bombing. How we felt in shock, how we felt angry, maybe how we felt vulnerable, and how we felt for those who lost loved ones and those who suffered grave injuries. Most of us remember that. But what most of us are less familiar with is the highly effective response to the disaster. According to experts who study these events, the response to the Boston Marathon bombing has been credited as one of the most effective and collaborative responses to a disaster ever studied. And the key ingredient of that effectiveness was the leadership by Devil Patrick. He did something nobody else did. He didn't give more orders. He didn't tell people what to do. He didn't make more decisions. He did something nobody else did. He entered the command center each and every time asking, "How can I help?" The governor's leadership spread through all response teams and agencies, a leadership of deferring control and authority to those best suited for the task. The governor was keenly aware of the very common trap we fall in during crisis. All of us have fallen into, I've fallen into. The trap to micromanage in order to feel in control. The trap to grab the reins, yank, and overstep into areas best handled by specialists. But leading like a compass does not mean being passive. Governor Patrick allocated resources at a high level. He was highly relevant at the high level because he was less involved in the weeds. He allocated jurisdiction. FBI, you guys are in charge of the investigation. Mayor of Boston, you're running your street or streets. He also realized he could add tremendous value as a trusted communicator for government, giving people around Massachusetts, the US, and the world hope. And he continuously communicated his common goal of saving lives. Nothing else, one priority, not 3, not 5, not 10, one priority, common goal, saving lives. Now, I sure hope that none of us will ever have to lead through such a horrific experience. And nothing will ever take away the pain and suffering of those impacted by the events. And yet, there is a lesson for all of us here. With our world changing faster than ever, generative AI seemingly reinventing itself every 4 months, every day something else is coming out of the White House, tariffs off, tariffs on. Our frontline people often do not have time to feed the question up the org chart and wait for a response back. They need to make good, independent decisions at the front lines, much like during disaster response. It might seem counterintuitive, but the faster things move, the more complex our world becomes, the more we need to give up control and authority. The faster things move, the more complex our world becomes, the more we need to empower and delegate. How do we do that? One thing we absolutely need to have is clarity on our common goal. Rather than seeking control, we seek clarity. How do we get there? Here's one quick hack we can all implement together with our team members. Ask and answer this simple question together with your teammates. What is the one thing we need to do extraordinarily well around here in order to win? What's the one thing? And that one thing becomes your common goal. For Governor Patrick, it was to save lives. Let me share with you some common goals of teams I had the privilege to be a member of. My recent peacekeeping mission to the Middle East. And because it's the UN, it's about 17 words too long. Observe, report, investigate all incidents that violate United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701. Note that the what and the why is spelled out, but the how is up to me. I, as the team commander, get to decide every day. Are we patrolling today to achieve this goal? If we are patrolling on foot, in an armored vehicle, in an SUV, maybe we're not patrolling. Maybe we're having lunch with a local mayor to understand what's going on in his town. Similar, 530-mile non-stop bike race across Oregon. Safely win the race and beat the course record, safety equals speed. Once again, the what and the why is spelled out, but the how is up to me as a racer. Do I start slow, finish fast? Do we attack in the uphills, in the downhills, at night, during the day? And by the way, I do have to attack in the flats because I'm too heavy to attack in the uphills. And humble brag, we did beat the course record and won. Let me share with you the power of common goal in action, quite literally in action. D-Day. The freeing of Nazi-occupied Europe had been planned for months and years. But within hours of the planes taking off in England, the whole plan fell to pieces. For those of you who are familiar with D-Day, or maybe even seen the outstanding TV series Band of Brothers. Who's seen Band of Brothers? You know that the Allied forces, the Allied airborne troops were spread all over Normandy. Virtually no trooper landed in this designated drop zone. But because each trooper, from the general down to the last private, had internalized her common goal, which was to secure key terrain, roadways, bridges, villages, they were able to improvise. They formed little ad hoc teams of 2, 3, 4, 5 and started to fight because everybody was crystal clear on their common goal. In the military, we call this commander's intent, the end state of a mission. D-Day was a planning disaster, but common goal or commander's intent saved the day. For those of you who like a little model, here's old school map leadership. I, as the leader, set the goal, and then I tell my minions, my employees, my staff members, exactly how they need to go from where they are to where they need to go. And by the way, everybody has to do it exactly the same way. Compass leadership understands that this has never been effective. We just saw the power of compass leadership during D-Day. And it's even less effective today. Our world is changing way too fast for it. So while I, as the leader, have the industry experience, the seniority, the responsibility, I am responsible. Do I really understand how to best use the latest AI generative tool to rewrite our HR procedures? Do I really understand how to use HubSpot and Jira and how to best use Slack? Compass leadership understands that I, as the leader, have to be crystal clear on a goal, ideally co-created together with my team members, but then I need to empower my team members to decide for themselves for how they go from where they are to where they need to go with as much creativity, with as much innovation, and yes, with as much new technology as possible. Compass leadership is where team members shine, teams thrive, and where magic happens. Much like at the Ritz-Carlton. The president of the Ritz-Carlton, Hervé Hamler, tells the story about a wheelchair-bound young man who checked into the Ritz-Carlton together with his family. Upon looking through the massive glass window out to the ocean, he took one look at the beach, turned to his family and said, "I sure wish I could swim in that ocean." The problem was that between the hotel and the sea lay a 50-meter stretch of soft sand over which the wheelchair impossibly could travel, hence crushing the young man's dream to swim in an ocean. Within earshot of the family was a maintenance worker who overheard the conversation. And she goes, "I'm going to do something about it." She quickly rounded up another 5 maintenance workers, and voila. A mere 5 hours later, there was the masterpiece, a brand new wooden walkway down to the ocean over which the wheelchair now could easily travel. For the team members at the Ritz-Carlton, it was just another day as part of a compass leadership culture where each employee is empowered to go to the next level, leadership get out of the way, and everybody having one clear common goal, which is top service no matter what. For the young man, it was the first time he ever swam in an ocean. What the Ritz-Carlton is most proud about is that nobody needs to tell its employees to do these things. Nobody told the maintenance worker, go and build a walkway to the ocean. And by the way, she didn't have to check with her supervisor either. Instead, the Ritz has built a culture where each employee is empowered to go to the next level, leaders that get out of the way, everybody having a clear common goal, top service, no matter what. That's the power of Compass leadership at the Ritz-Carlton. It's foundational to, as they say, creating memories that last for a lifetime. So guests don't just stay at the Ritz, but the Ritz stays with them long after they check out. In preparation for today's talk, I had the privilege to speak to three wonderful individuals, and one of them was Virginia, who's right there in the back, and she's going to speak tomorrow, by the way. So Virginia and I had a wonderful chat about common goal, about the power of shared purpose. And she shared with me that when she first arrived at the Raleigh Credit Union, there were values and there was a mission statement and some purpose, but nobody really knew any of them, and certainly it wasn't explicitly lived. So now they came up with this also powerful common goal: improving lives, driving possibilities. That's what we do at the Raleigh Credit Union. And by the way, how powerful is this? It goes internally for our teammates and externally for our members, right? Such a clear and compelling common goal. We had a wonderful wide-range conversation, which we continued over dinner last night. Just two other things that stood out for me when we chatted. Virginia, she said, how can I expect my teammates to relate to our members at the human level if we don't do this internally? I need to relate to my people, take them seriously, see them as whole human beings if I expect them to do the same with our members or our clients. I just absolutely love that. And then the last thing we talked about, actually not the last thing, but another thing we talked about was not every one of our great employees should or wants to become a leader, and yet we want to promote them. And I know there's a lot written about this. There's not enough career path for outstanding ICs. Individual contributors. So we need to find ways to promote them, pay them well, give them a great title as a subject matter expert, as a guru, because some of them do not want and should not become leaders. So thank you, Virginia, for our wonderful conversation we had a few weeks ago. So here's what I want you to do. We have a couple of interactive exercises throughout. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. Top of mind, what is your common goal of your team? And by the way, this is not a vision, mission, big workshop thing. What's the one important thing you need to do in your team? And you can make it time-bound too. Between now, what do we have now? September, right? Between now and November 1st, between now and the end of the year, what's the one thing you need to hit out of the park in order to win? Not 3, not 5, not 10. As Jim Collins famously said, you have more than 3 priorities, you have none. I'll give you 3 minutes to share with your neighbor what is your common goal in your team. Let's go. Question: who met somebody new just then? Raise of hands. Met somebody new just then? Okay, so I encourage you, by the way, so these conferences, quick time out here, these conferences are great because the speakers are really good and yada, 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 right? Where you really learn is from your fellow conference participants. Sure, I might have a few words of wisdom, whatever, but make sure you're meeting new people, you sit with different people. We're going to do another exercise later on, and I would like you to then mix it up and talk to somebody else, because that's where the real value is, right? It's in the networking, getting to know people. Okay, the power of one common goal, shared purpose. Lead like a compass, through the goal, empower, and then get out of the way. But we're going to move on to the second pillar, tough on results, tender on people. Tough on results, tender on people means holding my team members to the highest standards while building meaningful and collaborative relationships with them. Tough and tender, high touch, high standards. Dale Carnegie makes the concept come alive beautifully with a story about the test pilot Bob Hoover. Bob Hoover was returning from an air show in LA back to his home base in San Diego when all of a sudden, mid-air, the engine of the World War II propeller plane stopped working. With some deft maneuvering, he was able to emerge and land the plane, but it was badly damaged. Fortunately, neither he nor his 2 passengers were injured. His first course of action after exiting the plane was to inspect the fuel. And just as he suspected, it was filled with jet fuel versus gasoline. That's about the same thing as if we would fill our cars with orange juice. Upon returning to his airbase in San Diego, Hoover asked to speak to the mechanic who serviced his plane. Now, how would you show up with a mechanic? I don't know, I might break his nose or make him lose a few front teeth. Not very HR confirmed, I know. Here's what happened. The young man was sick with agony. Tears streamed down his face. He just had caused the loss of an expensive aircraft. He could have caused the loss of 3 lives. Nobody would have blamed Hoover for ripping the mechanic for his carelessness. But instead, he did none of that. He put his big arm around the mechanic's shoulder, looked at him sternly and said, "To show you that I'm sure you'll never ever do this again, I want you to serve my F-51 tomorrow." By choosing this calm, empathetic, yet very to the point way of communicating, Hoover made it safe for the mechanic to own his mistake and make good on it. From this day forward, the level of trust between Hoover and the mechanic was unbroken, and the mechanic never made such a grave mistake again. Why? Tough on results, tender on people drives performance. But how exactly? As we go through these 4 quadrants together, from soft on results to tough on results, from tough on people to tender on people, let's ask ourselves, where do I sit? Where does my boss sit? And where do the leaders in my credit union or my bank in general sit? The bottom right quadrant, we all know oh so well, unfortunately, is the fear zone. We've all had bosses who yell and bark orders and who leave morale as office roadkill. These bosses often achieve some strong production for a while, but at the steep cost. Everybody walks on eggshells, nobody speaks up. These are the bosses nobody wants to work for. We have none of them in the room, I'm sure. No. These are the bosses who light up the room simply by leaving it. The bottom left quadrant is the indifference zone. Maybe you've had a boss like that. The boss might yell at you, but there's no consequences for delivering subpar work, so people simply check out. A lot of the quit but stays happens in this quadrant. The top left quadrant, some of us can relate to. Here the boss is so conflict averse that nothing ever gets corrected, and standards continue to slide. If we're leading in this quadrant, we often burn out. Why? Because we end up doing our team members' work. This is the people first, results never quadrant. And the top right quadrant is, of course, the high performance zone. Holding my people to the highest standards while building meaningful, collaborative, and trusting relationships with them. And what is one of the quickest ways to build a trusting relationship? Is to show up with a bit of vulnerability. Now, I think we would all agree, it's no good opening every team meeting in tears, and my parents never really loved me, and my childhood was terrible. No, that is not what we're talking about. It's about getting at eye level with our team members and saying, "Hey, Virginia, I'm not quite clear about this either. What do you think?" "Well, hey, Christy, I'm working on becoming a better delegator, a better manager. What suggestions do you have for me to delegate better?" Sharing a meaningful personal goal is an incredibly powerful and very appropriate way to show up with a bit of vulnerability, because it demonstrates to our team member that we too are work in progress and always strive to get better. And we do it in 3 acts. The first act is me. The second act is my share. maybe a weakness, a goal, an insecurity, and third act, very important, what am I doing about it? Brad Smith, the former CEO of the financial technology company Intuit, is a shining example of how to build trust with a bit of vulnerability. And by the way, his tenure was well before the corporate scandal of free software, not free software. That was well before. He volunteered to his board to do a 360. I do not have to explain to HR people what a 360 is. He volunteered. Who's done a 360? I should say, now, raise your hands. Who's not? Okay. He volunteered to his board to do a 360. He wasn't told to. But then he took it a step further. He shared his 360, his strength, his weaknesses, his action steps, remember the third act? Not only with his board, but with the entire company. He emailed his 360 to every single person in the company, down to the last intern. He even, I love this, taped a copy to his office door for everybody to see. Who's done that? Nobody. Radically humble leader Smith is sharing with a bit of vulnerability. I, as a top dog, also work on stuff. I have weaknesses, I have strength, and here are my action steps with the entire company. In the process, build humongous trust across all of Intuit. More importantly, he made it safe for everybody at Intuit to start working on their own stuff. Because, if the top dog admits that he's not perfect and wants to get better, maybe I can do the same thing. This is an important and often misunderstood notion. Trust does not come before vulnerability, but vulnerability is one of the quickest ways to build trust. Sharing our shortcomings, by the way, the stuff everybody around us knows about us already anyway, makes us relatable. And I hate to break it to all of us. Our team members already know that we're not perfect. Why? They work with us every single day. Simply sharing what pretty much everybody around me already knows about me makes me relatable. Everybody admires perfection from a distance, and nobody can relate to it. Or as Brown famously said, vulnerability is the last thing I want to show you, and it's the first thing I look for in you. Let me share with you how building trusting relationships with a bit of vulnerability helped me to achieve strong results at the UN. It's 2021. I'm deployed as a military peacekeeper to the Middle East. Just finished a long day of patrolling the ceasefire line between Lebanon and Israel. Lebanon on the right of the barbed wire fence, Israel on the left. Looking forward to go for a run in the military camp. That's when my phone rings. It's one of my Swiss officers in Syria. He sounds in distress. Urs, we have a terrible situation. We've tried everything. We believe lives on the line, but nobody's listening. Can you help us in your role as Swiss senior national representative? He downloads some more details, and before we hang up, I tell him there'll be a leadership meeting the next day, and I bring up his concerns then. I hang up. I'm not happy. I'm not looking forward to this meeting. I now have to get the commanding officer, the CEO in Syria, into trouble by asking for a change in leadership. It doesn't help that I'm a low-ranking officer and a newly promoted senior, so I have to work double hard to be taken seriously. The meeting the next day. I lay out in no unclear terms the change that my officers need to see. I'm being very tough on results, very Swiss, very to the point. To my amazement, my voice is heard at the highest level. My low rank doesn't get me into trouble, and the concerns of my officers are immediately resolved. After the meeting, I was reflecting on this. What made it possible for me to be heard at the highest level, despite being a low-ranking officer? I believe the short answer is this. Up to this point, I worked incredibly hard on relationship building, on being tender on people. A few weeks earlier, when I was first promoted to senior, instead of boasting about my new title, which frankly I probably would have done earlier in my career, I knew to be effective, I needed to build strong collaborative relationships with key members in the mission. So I pulled out the org chart and identified about 30 people, strategically identified 30 people I knew I needed to build strong collaborative relationships with. And then I got to work. Over the next 10 days, I spent every hour I was not patrolling the ceasefire line on 30-minute relationship building meetings. During these meetings, I inquired about the other person's personal background, their hopes, concerns for the mission, their expectation of me as a senior. No other business agenda up front. No business agenda up front. I learned that the chief of staff and I shared a passion for ultra-endurance racing. The head of mission loved spending time in my hometown of Zurich in Switzerland together with his daughters. We shared, with a bit of vulnerability, built a foundation for a trusting relationship. We moved from seniority to connection. There's no question, coming back to that meeting, in my mind, that the main reason why my voice was heard at the highest level is because I made the effort to build upfront relationships with key members in the mission, including everybody at the leadership table. Sharing with a bit of vulnerability, built a foundation for a trusting relationship, drove results for my officers in Syria. An important lesson from the story is this: our feedback is much more likely to be heard and acted upon, both by our team members and, yes, our superiors, if we've made the effort to build meaningful and trusting relationships with them. Remember Carla Overbeck, soccer captain? Being tender on people gives me license to be tough on results. By now it should be clear that we don't advocate for relationship building because we want to be nice or liked or kind. No. We build relationships because it drives engagement, it drives performance, it drives trust. Leaders sometimes challenge me on this, and you might be thinking this right now. This is all very nice and dandy, but I don't really have time for this stuff. And I get it. Relationship building is never efficient in the short term because of the time and energy it requires. And by the way, the fact that you're all here today shows all of us that you're actually invested not only in content learning, but also relationship building. So you are already ahead of the curve. Relationship building is never efficient in the short term, but it always pays in the long run. You never know who you have to rely on when the famous stuff hits the fan, as it always does. Building bonds with others is a preemptive move. I just showed you my relationship map. Here's a quick exercise we can all do to assess and improve our own relationships. Grab a blank piece of paper, put yourself in the center, and then all the people that you relate, that you're connected to, are around you. And then assess the level of relationship you have with each of that person on a level of 1 to 5. And then assess the level of relationship you should have with that person, 1 to 5. Identify the 1 or 2 relationships with the biggest discrepancy, set aside 30 minutes, plan how you're going to ask questions, plan how you're going to reveal a little bit about yourself with some vulnerability. Is Jessica here? Jessica was another wonderful, she told me she might have to be at the internal strategic planning retreat. So I talked to Jessica as well. How is Jessica tough on results and tender on people? Jessica told me I always start with the end result in mind. Remember, commander's intent. When my people come to me with a project, we start, what's the desired end state of the project or the mission? Being crystal clear about the expectations and outcomes, tough on results. At the same time, Jessica talked to me about, I think many of us, her words, fall into this trap that we only delegate minutia stuff. We don't delegate enough decision making. And so she makes a real effort to delegate not only minutia, but whole decisions, and talk to me about going through her to-do list, going through the decisions she has to make this week, asking herself for every item, who else and can do this? And then push decision making as far down as possible into the organization. And Jessica is a parent like me, and she mentioned to me that she actually runs her family pretty much in that way as well. A lot of as was mentioned earlier, I'm a dad too, a lot of the principles that apply here also apply to parenting, the most difficult job I ever loved. Heather, is Heather here? Oh, thank you, Heather. So Heather and I chatted as well. And Heather, how is Heather? Tough on results and tender on people. I love what Heather told me. She talks to her people, especially the younger generation, and says, You are the architect of your own job, your own career. Unlike our parents, our grandparents, we need to be business owners. We have a brand, we have strengths, weaknesses, we have assets and liabilities, and we need to manage our job and our work life like that. So being very tough on results in terms of having clear expectations, what people need to take responsibility for. At the same time, Heather and I talked about the importance of highlighting individuals as humans. And I'm going to just simplify it a little bit, Heather, to make the point here. So there's a board. A board wants financial outcomes, right? And then there's HR. HR, I'm simplifying it, I totally get it. HR wants to train, develop, and coach people. That costs money. That's a tension, right? So what does Heather do? She humanizes individuals, individual contributors by spotlighting them to the board. So that the board sees this is not just a line item that costs us money, but these are actually real people with real stories who make real contribution for our organization. And I absolutely love how you described that to me. So thank you, Heather, for taking the time to chat with me. So now we're going to do a self-assessment. I want you to grab your phone, scan the QR code, and ask yourself, where do I naturally fall between tough on results and tender on people? Some of us are more relationally driven, so I'm more tender on people. Some of us are more results driven, more outcome driven, so I'm more tough on results. So give me the assessment of where you sit. Am I somebody who is more valuing relationships, sometimes sacrificing business outcomes, or am I somebody who's always or often driving for business outcomes and sacrificing relationship? There's no right or wrong. We all fall somewhere on the spectrum. Okay, so this is 77. I'm not surprised when I do this with HR audiences. It's off. But by the way, I spoke at NATO earlier this year in Brussels at HQ, and I spoke at the NATO Defense College in Rome, in Italy, 2 weeks ago, and it was 60 tender on people and 40 tough on results. So we're about 70 to 30. Okay, so the vast majority of us in the room are tender on people. So here's what I want you to do now. And I want you to talk to somebody else for 3 minutes than you did before. If you're more tender on people, what is one tough feedback you know you haven't given and you need to give? Could be at home too, by the way, as mentioned. Teenage boys, plenty of tough feedback. So what is the one tough feedback you know you haven't given and you need to give? On the other hand, if you self-assess as more tough on results, what is one act of tenderness you're going to commit to perform? It could simply be saying thank you to a team member. By the way, in front of the whole team, thank you very much. It could be a thank you note, an act of kindness, even a gift. I want you to walk away from our time together with at least 1 or 2 concrete things you're actually going to do differently because of the time we spent together. This is your opportunity now. Share with a different neighbor for 3 minutes what are you going to commit to. Let's go. All right, my friends. All right, my friends. I would love a couple of shares. Who would like to share? What tough feedback? What act of tenderness? Yeah. Who's willing to share? I'm going to volunteer somebody otherwise. Who'd like to share? Come on, it's not that hard. We're not shy. Act of kindness. Tough feedback. All right. I love it when the boss is volunteering the staff member. You got to just love that. Okay. You were voluntold by the boss. Here we go. Good luck.
Thank you. So I'm tender on people, and I'm working on giving some feedback that's critical to their development, but also just keeping it where it's to the outcome and not any other focus point, so that they can learn from it and hopefully accept that feedback and take it forward.
Okay, excellent. Right. Thank you. So there's a big story behind it, exactly how you're going to do this. We would get into it now, but we're not going to do it. Okay, one other person. Who would like to, maybe an act of kindness? Come on. I'm going to, all right, perfect. Thank you. Say your name, please.
Yes, my name is Rebecca, and I'm actually not one of the people that selected tender on people. I selected tough on results. But one of the things that we were having a conversation about at our table is that for people that are, tender on results, I really believe that giving that tough feedback, leaning in with managerial courage, that's a gift that you give to someone. Because if you think about, your own family, if there's feedback that needs to be given, you will tell your sister, your brother, your mom, something that you know that they do not want to hear, that will be really hard for you to say, because you care about them and because you're invested in the relationship. It's far easier if you don't care about someone to avoid the feedback and not give it. So I'm a firm believer that no one comes to work to not do a great job, and if we avoid telling them the things that we need to tell them, then we're not doing them any favors. So just remember, feedback is a gift.
That is excellent. And Rebecca got out of actually sharing what she would do by giving us, and by the way, clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Who said that? That's right, exactly. So, right? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, can we have one more share? From Jacob.
I'm tender on people, and so one thought I had is that I know of a manager, our company, who has complained about an employee or concerned with an employee's behavior, and the manager's more inclined to just wait for it to solve itself out, and I just need to follow up on that manager and offer any sort of help or coaching I can, but I need to follow up on that manager to actually, if there's a real issue, we need to resolve it instead of just waiting for it to magically go away. So that's something I can do to be a little more assertive to follow up on that situation.
Excellent, thank you, Jacob. So actually holding the manager accountable, if I hear you correctly, around the, can I pass those back? To give that tough feedback. We had actually an interesting conversation yesterday at dinner with Virginia around something very similar indeed. All right, tough on results, tender on people, the ultimate yin-yang of humble leadership, high standards, building trusting relationship. This notion that we either have to be a tough leader or a good human is a false dichotomy. We can all courageously do things in a human way. And sometimes, you all know this, the most loving thing we can do is actually to release somebody to the labor pool. Some people push back against humble leadership. This is weak, this is, you're a pushover. Absolutely not. You can be ambitious. Again, we talked about this yesterday, but you can be ambitious, you can be confident, and you can be humble. I'm going to go off script here a little bit. So just super briefly, if you think about it, it requires great confidence to ask the humble questions. Actually regularly asking for feedback from my team member. At the end of every one-on-one, what do I do well as your manager? What can I do better as your manager? Only if I have a strong sense of self, only if I'm fundamentally confident in myself, am I actually able to ask those questions as I should every single week and hear the response. All right, let's go to our last pillar, championing a fearless culture. When we champion a fearless culture, we do three things. We reframe failure for us and our team members. We encourage speaking up. We praise the messenger versus punish the messenger. We hug the messenger versus shoot the messenger. And we acknowledge and thank. Let me make this come alive with a story about two teams. Two teams that are engaged in an all-out competition. Both are in it to win. It's a hard battle with no prisoners taken. One team is a bunch of Harvard MBAs, and the other team is a group of kindergartners. But they're not competing in sports. They're competing for who can build the highest structure with the following items: 20 pieces of uncooked spaghetti, scotch tape, string, and marshmallow. Who's done this competition? Give me a raise of hands. Okay, so the way it works, you would compete against every other table. You have 18 minutes. Who can build the highest structure with these items? And the competition has one rule: the heaviest item, the marshmallow, has to be on top of at the end. 18 minutes. The business school students strategize. Harvard is smart. They keep track of their time. Kindergartners don't strategize. They don't keep track of their time. They experiment, they start to build immediately, they talk little. When they talk, it's brief and abrupt. Give me this, no that, put it here, no there. The clock is winding down, 3, 2, 1, and there is a huge cheer from the winning team. Who's cheering? The kindergartners are. The kindergartners are kicking Harvard's behind. And stunningly, it's not a one-off. In dozens of competitions, kindergartners outperform MBAs by 16 inches. Any MBAs in the room? Give me a raise of hand. Yeah, you're the worst, actually. Check this out. 16 inches. Lawyers, we have lawyers in HR. Who's a lawyer? No lawyers? Okay. Slightly better, and then CEOs, 6. Dozens of competitions. But why? Why? And what's your name, sorry? Tara. Tara says we think too much about it, and we think specifically about our own ego. Harvard, MBAs, while seemingly collaborating, are distracted with managing their own ego and status. Who should be in charge? What will they think? Will I look stupid? Kindergartners don't care what everybody else thinks. They're not afraid to step on each other's toes. They're not competing for who should be CEO of Spaghetti Inc. They experiment, they start to build immediately. Most of all, they're not afraid to fail. Kindergartners don't win because they have better talent or more skills. Kindergartners win because they're fearless, because they have psychological safety. Kindergartners win because they're fearless. So what is psychological safety? To be clear, it is not standing around in a circle holding hands singing Kumbaya. It's not about being nice, it's not about being kind, it's not about being cozy, and it's most definitely not about lowering performance standards. A culture of psychological safety or a fearless culture means making it safe for each of my team members to speak up, questions, concerns, crazy ideas, without fear of being shamed or worse, risking my job. It's about speaking truth to power. It's about providing and asking for honest feedback. And sometimes, as we'll see, it's about saying, I screwed that up as a leader. For those of us who are familiar with the research, we know that psych safety came out of Harvard about 20 years ago, 30 years ago now, was popularized by Google, and has been replicated across a variety of industry. Airline crews, surgical teams, the military, finance, showing that psychological safety, a culture of psychological safety, is the best predictor of a team's performance. It's more important than who's on the team, the size of the team, if it's virtual or in person. So, this quote is actually in your little handbook that you gotten from the conference organizers. Culture eats strategy for breakfast, but talent apparently also eats strategy for breakfast. The culture one is a Peter Drucker quote that's actually in your book. So, if it's that important, how do we do it? I mentioned the 3 things. Reframe failure, encourage speaking up, acknowledge and thank. Professor Amy Edmondson, the queen of psychological safety and pioneer out of Harvard. By the way, does anybody know how Amy Edmondson came up in her PhD thesis with psychological safety? What happened to her? Okay, so she had this, I'm going to just quickly tell the story. She had this hypothesis that which teams make more mistakes? Highly functioning teams with high trust or dysfunctional teams where there's toxic culture? She would, as we all would, hypothesize that the highly functioning teams make less mistakes. Fair to say? The toxic teams make more mistakes. So she wanted to test that hypothesis. She ran the data. What came back? The highly functioning teams actually make more mistakes than the low functioning teams. She was just about to throw out her PhD thesis when she dug into the numbers and found what? There's a data set telling you that teams that trust each other, communicate well with each other, they make more mistakes than those teams that don't. Highly functioning teams don't make more mistakes, but they're more likely to report it. That's what she found. That's how Amy Edmondson out of Harvard, Professor Amy Edmondson, actually pioneered psychological safety. They make it safe to report on our mistakes. Okay, so Professor Edmondson tells the story about a United Airlines captain who opens every crew meeting with these words. She says, "I've never done a perfect flight before, and I'm going to prove it to you again today." I know, right? So imagine you're standing there in the galley, you're all excited, you got upgraded to first class. You overhear the captain. "I've never done a perfect flight before, and I'm going to prove it to you again today. So I need you. I need you to speak up when you see me do something wrong, because it will happen, and I will do the same for you." As you stand there reconsidering all your future United flights, it might dawn on you that this might actually be one of the safest flights you've ever taken. But why? The captain is reframing failure for her crew members. She's encouraging everybody to speak up. She's praising the messenger versus punishing the messenger, and the process builds a fearless, a psychologically safe crew. The captain knows that there is no such thing as a perfect flight. How many people flew here yesterday or are flying out on Wednesday? I hate to break it to all, there were mistakes made on every single one of your flights. And there'll be mistakes made. I'm flying out back to Seattle tonight. There'll be mistakes made. The captain knows that there is no such thing as a perfect flight. Much like for all of us, there is no such thing as a perfect HR procedure. There's no such thing as a perfect performance review, a perfect client deliverable. There just isn't. By encouraging everybody to speak up, the captain ensures that mistakes that are made by individuals, including her, the top dog, the CEO of the plane, are caught by the collective, and the most important outcome improves, which is what? The flight becomes safer. Psychological safety, tons of research has shown this in the military, in surgical teams, quite literally can save lives. I live in Seattle. I'm not going to get into Boeing, but there's plenty of research showing that the lack of psychological safety in the Boeing assembly plants for the MAX led to the disaster. So here's what I want you to take away from this little anecdote. I want you to have an explicit conversation with each of your team members around how we deal with mistakes and failures. You could say things like, "Hey Heather, much like everybody around here, I'm trying not to make mistakes, but I still make them. If you think you see me make a mistake, call me out on it. And maybe it's a misunderstanding. It's not a mistake, then we can talk about it. But if it is, I'll be thankful and I'll do the same for you." When's the last time you had a conversation with your team members around how we deal with mistakes and failures? My commanding officer in the Middle East had a different way of encouraging everybody to speak up. She opened an after-action review with these words. She said, "I screwed that up. And I know it. And here is what I'm going to do so it will never happen again." Her ability to go first then made it safe for all of us, her direct reports, and here it's my turn in front of the map, to own our own mess-ups, all because she went first. This particular powerful after-action review led to much better operations on the ground. Operational effectiveness improved by 20%, safety by 30%, all because she went first. I screwed that up. These might be the most important 4 words we can say as leaders. The best and most successful teams understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become invulnerable. The best and most successful teams, even and especially in the military, we know this from special ops teams, understand that being vulnerable together is the only way that the team can become unstoppable. We're going to do a little exercise in a few minutes here about vulnerability. But what about acknowledging and thanking? Alan Mulally, the former CEO of the Ford Motor Company, is legendary for his turnaround of the Ford Motor Company. But when he walked into his first leadership meeting, all the dashboard indicators were on green. You know the story, right? It's just nodding. All the dashboard indicators were on green, meaning everything was going to plan. So he turned to his team and he said, "Hey guys," it was all guys, "seriously? We're losing millions of dollars every day. You're telling me there's nothing that's not going well? At the next meeting, the dashboard indicator of Mark Fields, who would eventually succeed Mullally, was on red. When it was his turn to speak, he turned to his dashboard indicator and said, as you can see, mine's on red. We're holding the release of the Edge car because of technical difficulties. The whole room went dead silent. Everybody turned to Mullally and Fields, who was sitting next to him, and they all thought, dead man walking. What did Mullally do? Did he chew Fields out? Did he yell at him? Did he fire him? No! He started to clap and said, this is great visibility, Mark. Who can help Mark with this? It took another few meetings with dashboard indicators mainly on yellow and green and people observing how did Mullally react. Did he chew people out? Did he fire them? No, he clapped. And slowly and over time, all the dashboard indicators turned to orange and red, indicating what was really going on at the Ford Motor Company. And the team could finally get to work to turn the business around. Mullally is a shining example of how to acknowledge and thank so our team members feel safe to speak truth to power, to feel safe to say what's really going on in the business versus what they think we want to hear. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Our first reaction when our team members bring something up always needs to be, Lori, thank you for bringing this up, Lori. Even and especially if you disagree, if you have strong feelings about it. If you don't, if you smirk, interrupt, show disrespectful body language, you can be sure your whole team is watching. And next time, nobody will speak up. Thank you for being, but leadership is not the popularity contest. We always ask, we always listen, we always thank you for bringing this up, but we get to decide what, if anything, we're going to do about it as leaders. But our first reaction, thank you for bringing this up, because your whole team is watching how you show up when people delivering unpleasant news. Thank you for bringing this up. Okay, we're going to do a quick, fun exercise that you can all implement to help turn your teams into teams that are psychologically safe with two stuffed animals. This is called the Whoopsie Daisy. It's borrowed from Kim Scott's outstanding book, Radical Candor. At the next team meeting, nominate somebody for the Killer Whale Award. That's a Killer Whale Award. The Killer Whale Award goes to somebody who you've seen do outstanding work the previous week. That person, the recipient of the Killer Whale, then gets to nominate somebody else the next week for the Killer Whale Award, for somebody they've seen do outstanding work. Then, important, grab the Whoopsie Daisy, the Duck Daisy, and share your Whoopsie Daisy, something you messed up that week. Doesn't have to be something big. Maybe you misspoke in a meeting, you dropped a deadline. By sharing a mistake you've made, you help others avoid making the same mistake. More importantly, you normalize speaking up about our failures and mistakes so we can all learn from them and make it safe for everybody to speak up about what we messed up. You're going to love me for this, but we will do this right now. I want to share with a different neighbor who on your team gets the Killer Whale Award. On my team, I'm selling a book, and my Amazon ad guy hit it out of the park last month and moved, I think, about north of 200 copies just through the Amazon ads. So my Amazon ad guy gets the Killer Whale Award. I have plenty of Whoopsie Daisies to share. Who gets the Killer Whale Award, and what was your Whoopsie Daisy this week? My Whoopsie Daisy was that last week I was meant to deliver a deck, much like the one you're seeing right now, to a client, and I was a day late, which is really not cool for a speaker. So I have better systems in place now that I deliver the deck on time. So I want you to take 3 minutes with a different person. Who on your team gets the Killer Whale Award, and what was your Whoopsie Daisy? 3 minutes, let's go. The Killer Whale and the Whoopsie Daisy, a light-hearted way to make it safe to speak up about our killer team members and our own mess-ups. I'm not going to volunteer people now to share their Whoopsie Daisy. We can do this over drinks later on this afternoon and tonight. The soft stuff is not soft. The soft stuff of turning our teams into psychologically safe teams is tough. In the military, we often think of going up as courage, as going up against the enemy with a machine gun. And no doubt, my fellow servicemen and women, that requires guts. And the real courage is being the person in the room who has the courage to say things or ask things others don't have the courage to say or ask. Hey, what's really going on here? Or my favorite, what problem are we actually trying to solve? And for us as leaders, the real courage is to provide a culture where it's safe for everybody to say something when they see something. Despite the very clear business case for psychological safety, fearless teams are still quite rare. This is exactly why a fearless, a psychologically safe team culture can be a competitive advantage at your credit union and your bank. So let's start our fearless journey right here today, even if it's just with 2 stuffed animals. Oops. Let me wrap it. We'll have time for a few questions. Let me wrap it with one final story that embodies all of the 3 pillars of leading with radical humility. Check out this job ad. Men wanted for hazardous journey. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success. Excuse the totally outdated gender language, it's a very old ad. 2 questions for you. Who's gonna apply? Do we have adventure spirits in the room? Second question, who wrote the ad? I gave this story, or a part of this, the speech, the story, at a life science client in Seattle a few months ago. And somebody in the back yelled, "It's from a dating app." So we went like, is it Bumble, is it Hinge, is it Tinder? No. It's not from a dating app. This ad is said to have been placed in London newspapers in the 1910s by Irish polar explorer Ernest Shackleton. With both the North and South Pole conquered, the one remaining challenge was to cross Antarctica on foot, the highest, coldest, windiest continent on the planet. And Shackleton needed 26 crew to get it done. How many do you think applied? You just saw the ad. He needed 26. How many do you think applied? Yell it out. 100? 200? 2? 5,000. Do you have talent issues in your credit union, in your bank? Try this. 5,000. 5,000. Shackleton was unorthodox, well ahead of his time in terms of his humble leadership. He was also unconventional in how he hired. He hired for life outlook and attitude and trained for skill. He hired for life outlook and attitude and trained for skill. One man, he asked during the interview, "Can you sing?" And when the young man responded, "Do you mean, can I hold a tune? Probably not. But can I join into rowdy sing-along together with my mates? Absolutely." The man was hired on the spot. After Shackleton assembled his crew, he made relationship building his core leadership priority. He wanted to understand each man, their strengths, their weaknesses, their personal styles. He was tender on people by getting to know everybody on a deeply meaningful personal level. But he could also be tough on results. After they sailed across the Atlantic from England and arrived in Argentina, the cook got terribly drunk one night and behaved totally inappropriately. Shackleton immediately knew the man's not fit for mission and fired him on the spot. But in his tender way, he found the cook another job on a ship that sailed back to England. The crew set off from Argentina and sailed south. They didn't know it, but there would be more pain, misery, and danger awaiting them than they could ever have imagined. Just 100 miles from reaching Antarctica, their ship, the Endurance, got stuck in the thickening pack ice. They were 1,000 miles from the closest human being. Nobody knew their whereabouts. And remember, this was well before fancy outdoor gear like down jackets and Cortex shells. They had no choice but to settle in for a long, dark, miserable winter. During the long 10 months that followed, Shackleton made keeping morale of his crew up his top leadership priority. He organized regular sing-alongs, poker nights, birthdays, became elaborate celebrations, and he even, and I love this, organized soccer matches on the ice and dog sled races. To fight boredom, increase stimulation, and tear down hierarchy, he had each crew member cross-train on every other position on the ship. The scientists would help peel potatoes in the galley, the photographer would help with the sled dogs, and he himself would scrub and clean the ship. Every man received the same portion regardless of rank or position, unheard of on other English ships. In today's terms, we would say Shackleton tore down silos, drove engagement, built trust, built a strong team. Because of this trust, each crew member knew it was safe to come to Shackleton with questions, concerns, crazy ideas. He was famous for his ability to relate to, listen to, and speak to anybody. He praised the messenger versus punished the messenger, and in the process championed a fearless, a psychologically safe crew. After 10 long months, the pack ice started to shift and move. But instead of freeing the Endurance, the shifting and moving pack ice started to crush the ship, and the Endurance sank. Their only way to reach safety disappearing before their very eyes. The crew was stuck in the middle of Antarctica on floating ice with nothing more but 3 life rafts and a pile of gear. As the ice continued to shift and move, they sometimes wake up in the middle of the night. There's a foot-wide gap under their tent. Shackleton dug deep and knew the only way to safety was to try and reach one of the small islands 200 miles away. During the 16 miserable, long days and nights at sea, Shackleton changed destination 4 times because of changing weather conditions. When conditions changed, Shackleton had the self-awareness and, yes, the humility to say, I screwed that up, and swiftly change course. After 16 days and nights, they arrived on Elephant Island. For the first time in 16 months, they set foot on land. But there was nobody there to help them. The crew was in terrible condition, and food was running low. Shackleton dug deep again and realized now the only way to safety was to try and reach the closest whaling station on St. Georgia Island, 800 miles away, across one of the most treacherous seas in the world, where 100-foot waves are the norm. He grabbed his best life raft, 5 men. It was 800 miles in an open life raft across one of the most dangerous seas in the world. No maps, only the stars. Miraculously, after 3 long weeks, they made it. Do we have any sailors or boaters in the room? Can I have a show of hands? Who likes to sail or boat? Anybody? I'm speaking specifically to you, of course to everybody else as well. To this day, this is considered the greatest feat of open water navigation we know of, to this day. But they landed on the wrong side of the island. To get to the other side of the island, where the whaling station was, they had to climb over 10,000 feet high glacier mountains. The manager of the whaling station on the other side of the island was a tough Norwegian whaler called Searle. Searle knew of Shackleton, but like the rest of the world, presumed him dead. So when Shackleton and his 5 men finally walked into the whaling station, knocked on Searle's door, he opened the door, took a step back. There was a shocked look on his face, there was a long pause, and he finally asked, "Who the hell are you?" The man in the center stepped forward, and a quiet voice said, "My name is Shackleton." Searle, the tough Norwegian whaler, not exactly known for his strong display of emotions, turned around and broke down in tears. It took Shackleton another 4 months, 4 ships, 4 attempts to finally rescue the rest of his crew who by then had been stuck in Antarctica for almost 2 years. Shackleton's mission clearly failed. Not only did he not cross Antarctica, he never even reached the continent. And yet he had the humility to recognize his failure. He reframed his failure from, I failed to cross Antarctica, to, I brought home everybody safe. And in the process, he failed successfully. And throughout his journey, he led like a compass by being crystal clear around the common goal. Get to Antarctica, get through the winter, get to Elephant Island, get to St. George Island, finally bring home everybody safe. Shackleton's voyage, to this day, is considered the #1 survival story, and his leadership is widely admired, including, by the way, a Harvard Business School case study on his leadership. Why? Well ahead of his time, he applied himself to leading with radical humility. How? He led like a compass, he was tough on results and tender on people, and he championed a fearless culture. Quick personal anecdote before we have time for a few questions. I long admired Shackleton's leadership, and I shared that admiration with my father. So in 2002, when the Seattle Maritime Museum organized an exhibition about Shackleton's voyage, I bought my father this t-shirt. And it has the endurance on the front, and on the back it has this quote, contrasting Shackleton's leadership to some other explorers. For scientific discovery, give me Scott. For speed and efficiency of travel, give me Amundsen. But when disaster strikes and all hope is gone, get down on your knees and pray for Shackleton. I gave this t-shirt to my dad as a gift, and he wore it on many of our outdoor adventures together. My dad and I were very close, and he passed away in 2010, but ever since, I've been holding on to this very t-shirt as a reminder of the strong bond I had with my father and our mutual admiration for Sir Ernest Shackleton's radically humble leadership. Now, there's a good chance that none of us will ever cross Antarctica on foot. I'm a pretty adventurous guy. This one I'm going to give a miss. The lesson remains, though, if Shackleton could apply himself to humble leadership 110 years ago, then doing exactly that is within the reach of all of us and within the reach of all of our team members. I have some downloadable resources for you here while I take questions. This is up. There's nothing for sale on my website. You might find my book somewhere. But there's additional stories, case studies, research that might be helpful. We have time for a few questions. I'm a little bit over. I have about 2 minutes left. So any questions, comments? I'm going to hang around afterwards as well. Questions, comments? This is good. This is either a really good or a terrible sign. There's no questions. But I hear you. I'm going to hang around, so no questions? Okay. We will, yes, there's a question. Microphone, please. And state your name, please.
Hi, it's Verna. Loved your story. What inspired you to write this book and to do this?
So the topic of humble leadership has been interesting to me for a long time, and there's a longer backstory which I can tell you afterwards over coffee. But the short version is going back into the military after having been out for 22 years. I rejoined. Swiss have a national service model, so I was able to rejoin to serve in a peacekeeping mission. To my huge surprise, the best commanders I had in the military were actually deeply humble people. They had deep self-awareness. They were tough on results, tender on people, and they built psychological safety. So this counterintuitive experience of going back into the military at 50 after having been out for 22 years and experiencing the power of humble leadership, that, in a nutshell, inspired me to write the book and talk about it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Other questions, comments? Okay, so now I have this thing for you. Here's the thing. This was an expensive 90 minutes. You all earn a lot of money. We spend a lot of money right now. So I want you to do one thing differently because of our time together. Give me the one takeaway. And I think about leadership development. I think about insight or action, ideally both. So chop up, what are you taking away from our time together. Maybe an insight, maybe an action. What are you going to do differently? And then write it down and commit to it. It could be 1 word, 2 words, whatever. Share your takeaway. Humility, fearless. Relationship building meetings, be more vulnerable. 1 goal, love it. Connect. Setting meeting with IT leadership to build a better connection, excellent. Yeah. Whoopsie daisies, clear common goal. Focus on relationship building, create a culture of fearlessness, speak up. Some introspective, I love that. Killer whale. Lead like a compass. All right, I'll give you like 10 more seconds and then we're going to wrap it. I have a minute left and then I'm... Marshmallow. All right. Do we make the slides available for participants after this? Okay, so you'll have all that as well. So thank you, everybody, for playing. So let me end with this, and I'm going to hang around afterwards for coffee and whatnot. I have a few books if you want as well. Let me end with this, which I believe with all my heart. The future of leadership in our banks, in our credit unions, in HR is leading with radical humility. And it starts with all of us right here in this room. It's about the commitment we make to the sort of leader we want to be, the sort of teammate we want to be, the sort of team we want to build, the sort of organization we want our credit union and our bank to grow into, and yes, the sort of world we want to live in. So here's my invitation, my challenge to all of us. As I mentioned, while these 3 pillars are still fresh in your mind, let's over the next 3 days commit to 1 action, ever so small. Apparently I'm big on takeaways and actually do something different, right? Do 1 thing different. If you can do that, if I can do that, if we can all do that together, then I'm convinced our finest days as a radically humble HR leader in credit unions and banks are straight ahead of us. Thank you so much for all the great work you're doing. I appreciate it a lot.